You're listening to the Grit to Growth podcast. Real talk with real business owners and professionals who built their freedom the hard way and now want more time, money, and impact.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Grit to Growth podcast. I'm your host, Levi Tislau with Mailbox Money out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And today I'm joined with Russ Van Der Werff, an expert, executive, and technical leader who spent his career turning complex ideas into real-world solutions. He's currently helping lead the way at Aerostar, a company focused on breakthrough technologies and global impact. Russ, great to have you on the show.
Hey, Levi, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Well, Russ, why don't we give the people kind of your background personally, how you got started on your career path, and we'll get into what you're doing today after that.
Yeah, for sure. So, your introduction was really colorful, but I think I like to tell people I didn't make it too far in life. So I grew up here in South Dakota, about 2 hours away from Sioux Falls, where Aerostar is based here. But one of the cool things is, finding out that you can do really interesting things without having to go physically that far away. So my background, I went to school for engineering, electrical and computer science, and that's kind of the angle I came from originally. I jumped into that out of school and pretty quickly ended up into kind of the project and product management space. So trying to figure out how to solve problems for customers with the tech rather than doing so much of the design work. And I was working at a company doing video-related production work here in town, building equipment for DirecTV and ESPN and those kind of places for the first 12 or so years. And then about going on 9 years ago now, I jumped over to what was then Raven Aerostar. And we could talk a little bit about what I'm doing here, but it's been a wild ride and a lot of fun growing a team and making some products that I don't think anybody thinks should exist. So that's the cool part. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Why hit on some of them for us? Why don't you?
Yeah, for sure. So for those who aren't familiar or tracking, Raven got started in the 1950s doing high-altitude balloons. So it was a lot of scientific experimentation, launching things like future astronauts and equipment and things up to the edge of space, 100, 150,000 feet, which for reference is, 3 to 5 times higher than an aircraft flies. It's really up there. It's outside 98, 99% of the Earth's atmosphere. And at the time, it was a lot of scientific curiosity stuff. And then fast forward about 40 years, 50 years, somewhere in there, a group at Aerostar started working with a little company called Google that you might have heard of.
Once or twice.
Yeah, they do some stuff. But at a high level, they were their moonshot lab, what they call their moonshot lab, Google X, was looking to figure out if they could do communication from these high altitude balloons. So the idea was, how do we connect the unconnected, the last billion people, not the next billion people, but the last billion people? Think sub-Saharan Africa, rural South America, places where there's no infrastructure. And they started experimenting with Aerostar on balloon work. And over about 10 years and about 3,000 flights and over 1 million flight hours, we really took the idea of doing these high-altitude balloons from being focused on weather and research and things like that to a real operational model. So I think the thing that's important to understand is really turn the corner on figuring out how to steer the systems. So for the first 50 years of doing this work, it was let this thing go and let it float and get some data. But what we learned is by moving up and down in the atmosphere to catch different wind currents that, by the way, the weather models that are out there say aren't there, but they are there. We know now. We can actually park that balloon in a location in the world and do something useful, like connect people with a cellular radio that connects to cell phones or something like that. And so that's a pretty unique technology, a pretty unique application that we've developed over the last 10 years or so. And I think we're obviously the world leader and one of the few who can do it. And I think it's got a lot of legs to go really cool places. So it's fun.
That's awesome that something like that is here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Like you mentioned, you found out quick that you didn't have to go too far to do something cool.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I joined about 10 years ago, so that was partway through the loon work. And at the time, I was just kind of looking for a new challenge, and I got to talking to some folks at Aerostar. I didn't know anything about what they were doing ahead of time. And it's like, wait, you're doing what? With balloons? That's a thing that anybody does? Yeah, why not? And so really, my mission in life since I've been here was to try to figure out how to take that technical idea and expand it out to other markets and applications. So once you have a new kind of aircraft, basically that can last months at a time, our longest duration flight is over 300 days with one system.
Wow.
So think of something you can launch, you can park it somewhere, and you can be airborne for almost a year. That opens up a lot of new applications, a lot of new opportunities for all kinds of things that we can talk about. And so it's been really interesting. I've been fortunate to be part of the team and grow the team, lead the team from being, maybe a dozen engineers with kind of an interesting idea to about 80 people now that are doing everything from worldwide flight operations to design to program management and market engagement. And so I'm kind of the general manager of the balloonosphere around here now, and I'm out here trying to make a business out of this. It's a lot of fun.
I think you should make that your title on LinkedIn right there.
For
General
a while,
manager.
yeah, for a while I had Chief Balloon Evangelist on my LinkedIn, and people. And I started getting mail with that title, and I was like, okay, maybe this isn't.
Maybe I shouldn't do that.
I don't know.
That's hilarious.
Can't
So,
take yourself too seriously as the balloon guy.
what's it been like now that was leading people and teams? Was that kind of always your goal in your career, or is that something that just kind of ended up happening for you?
Early in my career, I really wasn't sure what my goal was. I like a challenge. I like to do something interesting and unique and hard, and I like to learn. That's kind of my personality. But I'd say, even through my first act at Sencor in town here, doing kind of the product line management, tech road mapping, I started to pick up more of a team to help with that aspect of customer engagement, tech planning, and then we're talking, like I said, starting with a pretty small number of people when I joined here 8, 9 years ago, and it just took off, right? It just grew so much, from a business perspective that we needed more people. And so I've learned
Yeah.
a lot of lessons the hard way, and it's been fun and challenging, and leading a much bigger team now. I enjoy it. That there's something, if you're motivated, smart, and just like a challenge, that doing the work is always the thing that gives you satisfaction, right? You like to dig in,
Yep.
get your hands dirty, but you quickly realize that if you want to do something truly cool, truly great, you can't do it yourself. And so, you really start to value that. And I think the other part that's interesting is, just learning how to keep this group and team entrepreneurial and decentralized, because we're in such a unique, interesting, spread out application and market. And it really takes a lot of flexibility, a lot of pivot, a lot of people who are just willing to do what it takes, whether that's writing C++ code or holding the rope to launch a balloon or talking to a customer. And so one of the things that's been really fun for me is being able to grow over the last 6 or 7 years, a real team of technical entrepreneurs in Sioux Falls, which isn't necessarily what we think of as the norm here in terms of the businesses that most bigger
Yep.
companies are in.
Yeah, that's very cool. Would you mind, for listeners who either do want to get into kind of leadership and team building, or just happen to find themselves in that role now, that you mentioned early on there was some lessons you learned maybe the hard way. What's a piece of advice you could give them to maybe not learn it quite as hard?
Yeah. So I can say a few different things. One, when it comes to just personal development, don't stop investing and don't stop making the time. There are resources out there for building the kind of soft skills, communication skills, leadership skills, especially for someone like myself coming out of an engineering background. That may not be where your training is and what your natural abilities are. But I was really fortunate when, with Raven to have a whole team that was invested in developing
Yeah.
leaders, technical leaders in particular. And so we had regular coursework, we had workshops, we worked Dale Carnegie and other programs. And I think those things pay off. They may feel rote when you're doing it, but what you won't notice is the way that those ideas creep into the back of your mind. You start using them, especially as you have to start being a leader. So don't stop investing in yourself. And then the other half of it, not the personal development half, but just adopting a mindset and an attitude. There is a real dichotomy to leading a team, especially entrepreneurial technical people. You have to give a vision, you have to give a direction and a goal, and you have to repeat it constantly, because you think about it all the time and everyone else doesn't. But the other half of that is you have to be willing to let people own and have accountability for their scope of work. And you have to flow that scope down to where people can actually feel like they're driving something, or you won't have technical entrepreneurial type people. They won't stay engaged, right? They need to
Yeah.
have their hands on something. And so it's a little bit like riding a bull a lot of the times. You're holding on and hoping, but you're trying to set a direction. You're putting all your energy into it, and it's a balance, right, between letting people run and make mistakes and learn from them, and making sure you're setting enough of a goal, enough of a direction that we're moving the right way. So I think it's been eye-opening for me how challenging that is. It's easy to sit with a small group. If you have 3, 5, 10 people, you can all kind of sit in the same room and you talk every day and you're kind of on the same page and you know where you're going. Once it gets
Hmm.
to 20, 50, 100 people, it gets harder. And when it scales more, I'm sure it gets harder than that. And you really have to put intentional time into distilling the vision and the key goals and repeating them over and over again, and then listening to feedback from the people actually doing the work. So I don't know if that's a little too rote, but I mean it really is true. It's a constant everyday battle, and you have to keep both things in mind. You have to set the direction. You have to give people a reason. You have to give them a why, and then you have to let them get there their own way to some extent, or they won't be effective. And that's also recognizing that you as a leader just don't have all the information. You'll never know everything, and you have to have that humility to it.
It's definitely a dance to get those right. And yeah, you're not going to get them right 100% of the time, but having a goal of getting, at least there is two sides to it, right? I think maybe
Yeah.
some people excel at one and not the other, and that can be just as big of a problem.
Well, and I think culturally, if you think of how leadership was done, 50 years ago, it doesn't work quite the same way. I think people today have access to so much information, and they're used to being able to evaluate those pieces of information, make decisions themselves. And so, where it may have been previously that leadership was mostly around defining tasks and parceling them out, now I think it's more about helping people see why they need to do what they need to do so that they can get excited about setting their tasks and running with them. And that's keeping people motivated, especially, like I said, younger technical people with a lot of energy. And so there's been uh, there's been some work too when you look at some of the resources that are out there to adapt and evaluate. Like, well, what still makes sense in today's culture? I think of myself as you know, it's not a democracy, but you have to think of it that way. People have to believe that they should do what you want them to do. You just can't just tell them what to do. You have to give them the why you're making the
Yeah.
decisions, and be transparent so that they're motivated to go the direction you want them to go.
Amazing advice right there. So, if you wouldn't mind, say you have a big complex project or problem on your plate, what's kind of your approach to breaking that down and getting the right solution?
Yeah, so I mean, with where I sit now and having a little bit larger team, some of that comes to having the right organizational structure below you so that people know what their job is and who has which piece of it to tackle. I have a great group of folks right beneath me that have engineering, operations, customer programs, and things like that under their purview. And so, if it's a big, complicated, messy thing, the first thing is to get those people and their key leads to understand what are we trying to do and why and who for. It all comes down to what is the end customer user, somebody's actually trying to accomplish something, trying to do here. What
Yep.
all the internal stuff has to fall out from that. So, on one hand, uh, getting them involved and engaged up front, getting them enough context to understand that is the starting point. And then for me, where I sit today, because it's a big enough group, mostly then I'm letting them go away with their teams, and they know what their parts of it are based on how we've set the organization up. They have to come back to me with their plan of how they want to tackle that, and then we talk as a group and kind of tweak and adjust. So when you're maybe one level lower, if you're managing individual contributors as a frontline leader, it's a little different, and you're looking more at task breakdown. But for
Yeah.
me to get done what I need to get done, it's more about setting up the structure in the organization to get it done, and then giving them the vision, the
Very
goal.
cool. Russ, if there's, I know you guys have tons of stuff going on there, but is there anything that you could share with us that Aerostar is doing here, maybe in the near future, and then maybe give the bigger picture goal that's going on there?
Yeah. So I mean, the big picture vision is pretty simple. We think we have a cool new technology that doesn't replace everything else, but solves problems that there's no other airborne, aircraft or anything that can do what we can do. And so our goal is to make stratospheric ballooning ubiquitous. We want people not to be surprised when they see a balloon. We want to see fleets of balloons out there doing jobs for people across the world, right? Now, we're not there in 2 or 3 years, right? But you got to have an endpoint. You got to have a vision for it.
Yep.
And I think dominate the stratosphere, is what I always put on our little strategy slides. You need to be a little aggressive. We're going to have the best platforms available to do those kind of missions. So that's the long-term goal. But what does it mean, and why would anyone care? Let's go zoom in a little bit on a couple of applications of cool things that we're working on that might connect, individual listeners who aren't technology or aviation enthusiasts
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. So there's some cool stuff. One thing I want to touch on for an application that we've done some early demonstrations and are looking to expand throughout the next summer is tracking wildfires and enabling communication for firefighters. So the ideal problem for a stratospheric platform is one that is regional and it's persistent and it's seasonal. So I can put a balloon up, stay in one place for several months with complete uptime, right? When you're flying an aircraft, you have to fly and refuel, et cetera. If you're launching a satellite, it's very expensive to launch a purpose-built satellite for a purpose-built application. What the balloon can do is inexpensively and quickly get in the air, get to a place, and stay there for, say, months. And so one of the places we see that really useful is wildfires, right? There are certain regions of the United States where there's a big problem with it. It tends to be seasonal. It tends to be persistent. It's going on throughout a certain part of the year in a region. And so we worked recently with NASA and the U.S. Forest Service on something they called Project Strato. And I can send you some links. And there's actually a cool YouTube video we did with Fresh Produce here in town about it.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
Yeah, it's cool. Maybe you can splice some of it in if it's interesting. But at the high level, what we're doing is we've got a balloon. We put a cellular radio on it so it can connect to a handset. We put an infrared camera on it. And then we fly it and park it over the fire area. And what it does is two things. The number one problem these wildland firefighters actually have is communication. When you're in the mountains of Idaho, you can't get a cellular connection.
No, you cannot.
You can stop and set up your Starlink terminal and wait for it to home in. But if the forest is literally on fire around you, that's not great either, right? So what we can do is we can put that balloon over the active part of the firefighting and put a spot beam, if you will, of communication, a bubble of cellular connectivity over that area, so that a regular cell phone now has data service so that they can communicate when they need help, so that they can see what's going on. But more importantly, they can have situational awareness. So working with the Forest Service, they've got something called WolfTech, which is a software. So it's basically a moving map, like a Google Maps, where they can push the locations of the firefighters, the engines, and the active burn areas into it. So now imagine you're in the middle of the forest on this wildfire and you don't know what's happening over the next hill. Well, now you've got your phone and you can see this map and you can see where everybody else is at. You can see where the current front of the fire is. And that is truly a, connect, protect, and save lives is our buzzword around here. And that's doesn't get more on the nose than that. So that's really cool. And then the other thing we've gotten is we're using, working with a partner company called Range and Bearing that does image processing and some AI type stuff. They're looking at the images that the balloon is capturing in real time, and they're turning those infrared pictures into a boundary of where the fire is at that minute. So now that firefighter has not only a map of where they and everyone are at, but they have real-time information. And previously it was like they'd fly a plane over once a day. Somebody would draw a map by hand, and then they'd pass it out, right? So that's huge difference in awareness. So that's one pretty cool application, I think.
I can't even imagine if you guys are accomplishing that, all the other applications that are going to come from this. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's really a unique platform. And again, that persistence and that ability to stay in one area continuously over weeks or months is what's unique. I mean, we aren't going to replace global satellite communication network, and we aren't going to replace aircraft for carrying people around and things like that, right? But the combination of attributes that we can provide does open up some really unique new ideas for how to use airborne vehicles. So.
Awesome. Well, for those who are listening who want to maybe just follow along on your and Aerostar journey, or would like to learn more about either being part of it or any other kind of thing promotional, where would you send them, Russ?
We're pretty active on LinkedIn. And so usually when we have a new mission, a new application, a big success, we'll put some information up there. And I try to put a few of my leadership thoughts out now and again, too. So you can go tune into those. Recently was sharing the Steve Jobs quote, which is, I don't hire smart people and tell them what to do. I hire smart people so they can tell me what to do. And that goes back to that decentralized leadership. The wildfire stuff is on there. We do a lot of stuff with U.S. Department of Defense. We do a lot of stuff with NASA. And so just really cool, interesting things we're doing. And I think that's probably the best place to check it out for kind of a real-time feed, right?
Yeah. Awesome, Russ. Well, I appreciate your time today. And I know both myself and our listeners will really enjoy hearing how leaders like yourself are using innovation and technology to make a real impact.
Yeah, who knows what it'll be next? I didn't think it would be balloons, but yeah, always finding cool new things to do. And as technology advances, we really can make the world a better place. So it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Russ, and thanks for everyone for listening. We'll see you on the next one.
All right, thank you.
Know someone with serious grit and a great growth story? Send them our way at grittogrowthpodcast.com/guest.